Let me introduce this morning's Master of Ceremonies. As a member of Bravo Company, 3rd Ranger Battalion, Sergeant Keni Thomas was deployed to Mogadishu, Somalia, as part of a special operations package called Task Force Ranger. Their mission, to find and capture criminal warlord Mohammed Farah Adid. Outnumbered 10-1, the men of the task force distinguished themselves in an 18-hour firefight that will later be recounted in a highly successful book and movie, Black Hawk Down. 19 Americans died and 78 were wounded. Keni received the Bronze Star for Valor for his bravery in combat. Following his service in the Army, Keni decided to pursue a career as a country music artist. His band, Cornbread, was featured in the movie Sweet Home Alabama and regularly tours with the USO overseas. An Emmy-winning producer and a best-selling author, Keni has been recognized by Congress and the White House for his dedicated work on behalf of veterans and military families. He now works globally as a motivational speaker and leadership coach at the Downrange Leadership Development Course. Keni is a proud national spokesperson for the Special Operations Warrior Foundation, which provides college education to the children of special operations personnel killed in combat or training. Please turn your attention to the screens for a video.
Between 1990 and 1992, an estimated 300,000 Somali people died of starvation in Mogadishu, Somalia, due in large part to the seizure and theft of over 80% of the food being shipped into the country as a part of humanitarian relief. At this point, the United States stepped in, sending 400 Special Forces soldiers as a part of Operation Restore Hope. The primary focus of their mission was the capture of warlord General Mohammed Farah Adid and his high-level supporters. On October 3, 1993, the U.S. military engaged in a mission to capture several of Adid's high-ranking lieutenants. 35 minutes later, the mission was completed with minimal complications, with 12 of Adid's men captured. As the triumphant soldiers awaited extraction, the unthinkable happened. A U.S. Black Hawk helicopter was hit by an insurgent's RPG, sending it spiraling into the Somali dirt below. The soldiers were now involved in a rescue mission, and Army Ranger Keni Thomas was thrust into a leadership role and a race to the fallen Black Hawk. The battle fought by Sergeant Thomas, which took the lives of 18 U.S. soldiers, was later immortalized in the book and film Black Hawk Down. More than 20 years later, Keni is still involved in the military, this time behind a microphone with the USO, performing songs from his successful country music career. Here to tell us about his career and personal experience in this historic event, please welcome Keni Thomas.
Let's give a warm American Legion family welcome to Keni Thomas.
All right, thank you so much. Good morning, good morning. I'm gonna warn you guys, I've got no script. I do have this cool gavel. I don't have any slides, or it was just when I walked in, they asked me, hey, do you have any slides or anything you want to show? I'm like, no, I don't have any PowerPoint present. You know, and there's a reason for that. It's because I was in the Army. If I'd been in the Air Force, I would have brought a PowerPoint presentation. So here's what I'm going to do with my 15 minutes that I'm here on the stage. They teach you you guys know this, at every point that you go in your career, that you always go to a leadership school, and they teach you how to give a block of instruction, and there's always a communication course in there, and they tell you the best way to make a point is to tell a story. And there's so many stories I can tell you from this battle, but there's one that I think makes the point about, be the one. Be that person who can set the example for others to follow. So there's a lot of ways I can go with it. The way that I want to go today is the leadership aspect, which everybody in this room understands. When you came into the Ranger Regiment, they told you leadership was not a rank, it's not a title, it's not a pay grade. They were very clear about what leadership is. It is the example we set for the people we serve. So what I hope you get from this story today is when you walk out of the room and you head on home and head back to your families and your hometowns, what example am I setting? And then who are the people on my left and my right? Because there's always somebody on our left and our right, whether we remember that or not. And then I think what the story earns the right to say is, and when we need you to do that for each other is when it's hard. We don't need you when it's easy. We can do it ourselves. So I'm glad you guys got to see the video. It gave you a good background and went on. And everybody knows about that. The original mission was a raid. We were sent into Mogadishu to go get. There were 2 guys on our most wanted list, and they were in this meeting in the middle of the day, and if we could launch and get there in 10 minutes, we had a good chance of getting these guys. The mission went down flawlessly. We came in, we hit the target building, the Delta operators cleared the building, they got the prisoners were loaded on trucks, the trucks are driving away, everything's wrapped up, and I'm looking at the last vehicle turn the corner. They took the prisoners, loaded them on the vehicles are driving back. And I'm standing, and I'm like, man, 35 minutes from start to finish, we wrap this thing up. And then everything changed. And that's when the first helicopter got shot down. The call sign for the first helicopter was Super 661, and it was Bull Briley and Ray Frank were the 2 pilots. On board were his 2 crew chiefs and 2 Delta Force operators, and all 6 of those guys are going down. The mission has now changed. And I can remember what we were feeling in that moment because you guys have all felt it. It's no different. It's life. When life hits us hard and we didn't see it coming, that's exactly what we were all thinking. And it's like we get that phone call. I know there's people in this room that over the last 2 years probably lost somebody unexpectedly. My family was one of them. Hey, hey man, you get the call. Hey, Tracy's in the hospital. You need to get here. Well, I just talked to Tracy 10 days ago. He's fine. No, man, they guys say he's got COVID. He's not going to make it. You need to get here. Or God forbid, something happens with our kids. Or you get that phone call from the attorney saying, hey, man, your wife is done with the deployments. Could you just sign these papers so that when you get back, it'll all be done? And we're all saying the same thing when life hits unexpectedly. I'm watching the helicopter. There's a Black Hawk going down, and we see Super 6-1 is spiraling off to the northeast. I can't believe that that's happening. And I get it. It's not supposed to be happening. And I understand that. And we all take that step backwards. I can't believe that's happening. But it is happening, and it's happening to you. And the sooner that you can come to grips with the fact that it's happening to you, the quicker you can realize that it's happening to the people on our left and on our right. There's so very few things in this lifetime that we go through on our own and by ourselves. People around us are always affected. And then we have a choice to make. And that choice is, who do we want to be in that moment? I used to have a college coach. I'm very careful with the words I choose when I have a microphone in my hand. I had a college coach he would strike that pose and he would tell me, hey, when things go down, you need to do the right thing. And I always thought that do the right thing was way too broad. Because even among the Legionnaires in this room, if I asked you all, what is the right thing, I would get some slightly different answers. And we're all still, even in this room, we're all aligned in our thought process, but we would still get slightly different answers. Unless every single morning you stood shoulder to shoulder and you recited your Ranger Creed. Every single morning we stood there in formation and we said the Ranger Creed. And we said things like, I will never leave a fallen comrade to fall into the hands of the enemy. To the point when this is how the brain works. When you say something over and over and over again, you begin to believe it. And when you believe something, you will live it. Be careful. That's why I said, please be careful what you catch yourself saying to yourself. We are humans and we are magnificent at selling ourselves short. Stop doing it. You're a fearfully and wonderfully made, one-of-a-kind creation, and you have an ability to do something in that moment. So instead of me telling you, do the right thing, what I ask you is, who do you want to be in that moment? Because who we want to be will always dictate what we do. And if who you want to be is the person in the Ranger Regiment, when our whole culture was, I am here in the service of others, when someone else is in trouble, you will move to help. And I get it. I mean, it doesn't mean just in combat, y'all. Like, we send our kids on mission trips. We go and we help our community. We go with this program for kids. We do all what we can. We move to help. And obviously, our nation has had no shortage of shortcomings and tragedies in the last 15 years. Pick one. And then go back and watch the news, and you'll see there's always a story about one or two folks who did something absolutely heroic. And I love those stories. But the question I always ask is, why didn't everybody? Why didn't everybody move to do something to help? Why? And the sad truth is, folks, that most people don't understand what you already know because you've worn the boots. Most people have been lied to all their lives. They've been told, hey, you got to take care of number one. You better look after yourself. You better watch your back, Jack, because if you don't take care of yourself, no one else will. And they've began to believe it. And the problem with that way of thinking is it doesn't work. Nobody takes the hill alone. And so what ends up happening in those moments is, oh my gosh, people default. The research is very clear, y'all. When we get into these very stressful situations, we revert to that fight, flight, or freeze. And people will revert to the level of their training and the level of their thought process. And most people in those moments don't understand their value because they've never been told that they matter. They've never been told that you're part of something bigger than yourself. And so they default to doing nothing. And I don't want to point my finger of hypocrisy at the do-nothingers because I understand I've got to have some grace. I understand what do-nothing looks like because it's very insidious. It's do-nothing like, oh my gosh, there's a helicopter going down. I can't believe that's happening. And then you start backpedaling. Oh gosh, I hope they're going to be okay. You know, the best of intentions. And then, I can preach on this with authority because I catch myself saying it. Man, somebody ought to do something about that. And I hear that voice over my shoulder going, yeah, Kenny, what can you do about it? Somebody ought to do something. And I'm like, I hate that voice because it means I got to roll my sleeves up and go do something that I didn't want to have to do. It means I have to step out of my comfort zone and go do something that's hard. Nobody wants to go do something that's hard, but you will when it's in the service of others. And so the little bit of the story that I wanted to tell you was now the mission's changed. We now have to go move to that crash site. So the 80 guys that are at the target building are now going to move on foot to that crash. So if this is north, the east-west, we move about 3 blocks to the east, and then we turn left towards the target building is where the helicopter's supposed to be. When I turned the corner with my guys, we were the last guys to roll on this long group of men. I could see I could look down the street and I could see the first element making the left turn towards the crash, and everybody's kind of strung out down the road. And the whole city, during the mission, the people that have been shooting at us, but it wasn't that bad. And I know that sounds odd to say. There were people shooting at us, and it really wasn't that bad because they were missing. Which is exactly what you want to happen when people shoot at you. I had a Ranger instructor who say, hey, Ranger Thomas, if someone shoots at you and they miss, it's just like they never shot at all. So no reason to get upset about it. Just stay calm and do your job. But now the whole city is rushing for this crash, so it's become a foot race. When my guys turn the corner, picture the crash is about 2 blocks up here off to the right. You got about 100 guys now fighting on both sides of the street. The volume of gunfire is crazy over the top. Long before they ever made a movie, we called that moment Hollywood because I'd never seen anything like it. There were so many. We had been in some gunfights before, but they were over so fast because rule number 1 of a gunfight is don't get into one. Number 2 is if you have to, overwhelm them through violence of action with fire superiority. Now that just as a hint for you guys, this works really well. Violence of action through fire superiority works really well in a firefight, not in relationships. Don't try and take that tactic. Heidi doesn't like that part of it. So when we made the turn, there was so much gunfire going on, and I felt like I could handle the situation. I'm giving my guys sectors of fire. I'm pointing out bad guys. We're trying to figure out who's got a weapon and who's not. Why is this taking so long? Well, okay, so one of the pilots didn't make it was the word I got. They got his body crushed in the wreckage. They're trying to get his body out of the wreckage. Should be about 15 minutes, hold what you got. So I'm running around disseminating the information to my guys. It felt like I could handle it, and it was training up until it wasn't training anymore. And when it isn't training is when you start losing people. And for those of you who've been in that moment, you understand it. It's just a whole different shift of reality. People started going down, and they told us in retrospect that at that moment, within 7 minutes of that crash hitting the ground, most of us were already there. They told us we were already outnumbered 10-1. Now, so at least 1,000 people with weapons, insurgents moving in on that crash site. I never saw 10 guys at one time charging, but I did see twosies and threesies everywhere. But because we were so outnumbered, when one guy goes down, now you got 2 or 3 guys that move to help him. You have to start getting gaps in the line. And then the gaps start getting wider and wider, and it starts becoming a little bit overwhelming. And this, y'all, is when I saw people doing things that were incredible. And you guys know, we as a general public we throw the word hero around quite a bit. And everyone in this room would agree, just because we wore the uniform doesn't make us a hero. But what I saw on that battlefield when guys started getting hurt was nothing short of acts of valor. They will never be able to write enough citations that honor the valor and the heroic acts. And it's very simple. Like when you take it and cut everything back, like, why are you all doing this? Because none of it made sense to me at this point. Like, I really wish I could have just taken the red flag and thrown it out there and been like, hey, time out. Hey, you, stop shooting. Just stop, because I just want to grab my guys and get them out of here. I'll be out of your neighborhood in a minute. But it just became this crazy firefight. What I saw guys doing for each other, it was so basic and simple. And when you've had that at that core level, you know that if you take the basic needs, the basic human needs, if you go back to your psychology classes, after being food and shelter and safety, you know what the next thing is on that list? It's human connection. Most of us in this room, it's why you're still here together. We've had that shoulder to shoulder, that connection. I don't have to like you and be my best buddy, but I damn sure know I can count on you because you're coming. I don't care and the reason's so simple. If there were guys, if you asked them why they did what they did, I know what their answer would be. It'd be the same answer you would give, same answer I would give. It'd be, they would have done it for me. I don't care how far back you go in the history of the American soldier. I don't care. Take your pick. Go back to Gettysburg. Go back to Gettysburg. Take those boys on both sides of the line and ask them, hey, what you fighting for? I guarantee you no one would say, I'm fighting for the preservation of a union, or I'm fighting for states' rights, or I'm fighting against the atrocities of the institution of slavery. No one in World War II will tell you, you go ask somebody in the Battle of the Bulge, what you fighting for? No one's going to tell you I'm fighting against fascism of Hitler and his atrocities against the Jewish people and world order. Not going to tell you that. You go to my dad's generation, which is quite a few of you guys in here, hey, what are you fighting for? Well, I'm fighting for the spread, to prevent the spread of communism in Southeast Asia. That's not what Dad was fighting for. You go and ask any of us that made it out of the desert, and all my buddies that went to Afghanistan and back, none of us were fighting Al-Qaeda, none of us were fighting Sunni clan fighters, we weren't fighting ISIS, we were not fighting the spread of global terrorism. The only thing that you fight for is each other. That's it. And it's so simple. And each other is enough if you've told yourself every day that I am here in the service of others, that my calling is to be here for my comrades. And we said it every day. And everybody from the general to the captain to the lieutenant to the platoon sergeant, all the way down to private. My youngest guy was Private David Floyd. The only person David was in charge of was himself. But if he was setting the example for others to follow, and we knew we could count on him, we knew we were getting out of there, and we would make it. I don't know what y'all tell yourselves at this point in your lives every day, But if you need something great to tell yourself and remind you of why you put the boots on in the first place, and why you're proud of that time in service, and how do you take that and translate it into your daily life and who you come in contact with, I've got a great one. This is it's the motto of all special operations, and it's on every unit I've ever worked with. It's on the walls. The Ranger Regiment has it up on their walls. You go into all the Delta teams and the SF teams up at formerly Fort Bragg. They've got it up there on their walls. All the guys down at Hurlburt, all the kids down in Florida who are the special tactics squadrons in the Air Force, the 160th Special Operations Air Regiment guys, all the pilots and the crews, they all have it. All my buddies, I don't know if you all saw Jay yesterday talking on the panel. All my buddies with the great hair and the Oakley sunglasses and the tattoos of small sea mammals on their arms, they'll tell you too. You know how you know a Navy SEAL when you meet one, right? Because they'll tell you. That's right. I wish Jay was here because I would make fun of him. But we all over the special operations world. It's an Old Testament scripture. It's from the book of Isaiah, chapter 6, verse 8. And Isaiah 6:8 reads like this. And I heard the voice of the Lord saying, who will go for us? Whom shall we send? And I answered, here am I, Lord, send me. It should have been called the put me in coach scripture. I'll do it. Put me in. Y'all, that was easy when I wore the boots. It was easy when I was jumping out of planes at 30,000 feet in the middle of the night. It was easy when I stood shoulder to shoulder in the dark corners of the world, knowing if I made it back, I made an impact for the guys that I went in with. But when I got out, and that transition was tough. It took me 10 years to figure out this story wasn't a curse. I didn't want to tell it to anybody. I just wanted to go to Nashville and do my music and do my thing. But this story kept following me. And one day, one of my buddies who had been in the battle saw me in an interview, and he said, hey, man, how's the music business going? And I started complaining and they just want me to be like Kenny to sing in Ranger. All they ever want to talk about is Black Hawk Down. I whine, and Jeff looks at me and says, shut up. Jeff at this point had become a pastor. I'm like, hey, you can't talk to me like that. You're a pastor. He goes, shut up and do push-ups. Like that, quit. He goes, dude, we do not have to be happy about the soup sandwich we get handed. We do not. But we got to own it. Because if we don't own it, who will? And that is not a rhetorical question, y'all. The hard truth of it is that someone else has to own it. I'm not telling you to be omnipresent, put on your junior God badge, and do everything all the time. But do what you can when you can. Because if you don't own it, someone else will. And Jeff looked at me, and Jeff knew that was going to, kick me in the butt. And he looked at me and says, dude, I don't know anyone else from Task Force Ranger that has a microphone put in their face the way that you do. So if you don't tell our story, who will? So you better figure out what you're going to say, and you better say it fast. And Jeff was right. And it took me a while to figure out what I was going to say, but I got good at it. And that, just so you guys know, the key to being asked back for events is to not suck. So they will ask you back. I'm sure I'll see you again somewhere because I know I don't suck at this anymore because I owned it. I haven't told y'all anything you don't already know, and that's another key to being a great speaker. Tell people what they already know, and then they'll think you're smart. I have told you, please, remember that day that you raised your hand way back when, and for guys who even if you just did 2 years, what you learned in the basic training and what you learned at your unit and what you learned on the battlefield and what you learned on your time in service was that I am here in the service of others. All these skill sets that they're teaching me is so that I can better serve my people. The better I serve my team, the better I serve my people, the more likely our mission will be successful. Can you imagine if we can turn that mindset around to this way of thinking in our nation? Instead of it being me, and we start thinking about how do I serve others so that we as a country can do better. who are you leading, who are you following, and what example are you setting? That's what I hope you get from it. You see what I just did there? I told you what I was going to tell you, then I told you, and then I told you what I told you. So that's good communication. All right, follow me. I'm gonna sing a song, and I'm gonna transition as best I can. And there's another song that I like to do at these types of events because I think it sums up the story pretty well. But I actually had a request. There's that someone asked for, and they're like, "Man, I'm a big fan of your music," and I said, "You're the one." All right. But the song I want to do is, I'll tell you where it came, and the story behind it was we went to Arlington. Thanks, bud. I think it sounds good. We went to Arlington one afternoon, and it was right around the 3rd of October, which was the anniversary of the battle, and we were going to visit some of the grave sites of the guys, and I saw this old guy, not unlike some of you, and am I allowed to say that? Okay. And he was talking, and he was talking to himself. And I watched him, and I realized after a minute he wasn't talking to himself at all. He was having a conversation with his buddies. And so when he was done, I walked over to him, just started asking him his story. And he was a World War II guy, and that's how I got this story. And I went home, song kind of wrote itself, and I think it sums this one up, and it works well for this crowd. It's called The Last Band of Brothers. I was visiting the graveyards, endless rows of white, where they buried all the soldiers who ever took up arms to fight. I came across this old man, he was talking to the graves. I kept my distance, watched in awe as he spoke to them by name. He said, "Casey, you're still the captain of our high school football team. And Iggy, we know you lied about your age, you were 17. Holland, you were the first to fall when you came under attack. You boys are the heroes, the ones who never made it back." And he said, "But if you hear me, you better know you saved my life. And I won't forget the others on our left and on our right. Won't be long until I'm gone, you know I'll join you then. And then our last band of brothers rides again." I called that man a hero, and I asked if we could meet. But instead he introduced the boys of Easy Company. He said we never dreamed what we would see when we raised up our right hands. But our lives were bound forever when we stepped out on that sand. And he said, "But if you hear me, don't you know you saved my life? And I won't forget the others on our left and on our right. Won't be long till I'm gone, and you know I'll join you then. Then our last band of brothers rides again." So I stopped just the other day, and I noticed there was one more stone in the ground where Easy lay. And I said, buddy, if you hear me, well, I know you gave your life, and I won't forget the others on your left and on your right. A generation gone, though you've moved on, I know you're there with them. And now your last band of brothers who rides again. Yeah, your last band of brothers rides again. Rides again. Hey, God bless you guys for what you do and who you are and where you've been. Carry it forward. My name's Keni Thomas. Rangers lead the way.